Welcome to the Tournament Centre. Rich Hagon, Marshall Sutcliffe with you. It's been an incredible 3 days here at the first ever Players' Championship. 16 players, Marshall, the best of the best, and they delivered a thrilling day 3.
Yeah, I thought that was fantastic. I love the modern format. You know, that's kind of where I want to start off here, just because this is what decided ultimately who won this tournament. And we saw kind of an established deck clash up against a deck that we really haven't seen before. Shouta Yasooka brought Aether Vials to the tournament. We hadn't really seen those. None other decks in the tournament were running them, and in Modern, it's not that popular of a card, despite being very powerful. This went up against Jund, which is kind of the established menace. You know, it isn't quite as strong in Modern as it was at one point in Standard, but it still does the same things. You know, it makes you discard stuff that you'd rather not. It kills all the things that you cast, and then it runs you over with guys.
Absolutely. Listen, at the end of day 2, we cut to 4 players. That meant the semi-finals were Yasooka with his Aether Vial Eternal Command deck up against John Finkel, one of the greats of all time, and he was playing blue-white tempo. And the feeling was coming in that probably Yasooka had an edge, but I don't think a lot of people realized just how much of an edge.
Yeah, you know, I heard some rumblings. I was talking to some of the competitors that didn't make it to the top 4, and I was asking them, hey, what do you guys think about the matchup? And yeah, the general consensus was that the edge was towards Yasooka, but that it wasn't a dominating thing. You know, I had to say, I saw what Yasooka said to you when you interviewed him. He said, good matchup, but Finkel.
Yeah.
And I think that really put a stamp on it. I mean, this is John Finkel. Like, you cannot underestimate how important it is and how good of a player he actually is.
Yeah, and in the end, it didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
The deck was just so overwhelming in so many ways. Whatever way you tried to attack it,
Yeah.
it was a masterclass from Yasooka.
Right.
So that put him into the final. Now, the other bracket looked a little tighter, which was Yuuya Watanabe against Paola Vita Dama de Rosa. And this, again, was Jund with Watanabe, Zoo for Paola Vita Dama de Rosa, and Paola felt it was probably closer than Watanabe thought. Watanabe thought he was pretty firm favourite. And by 3-1, it was Watanabe that turned out the victor.
Yeah, I had a chance to speak with Reed Duke. You know, he didn't have the best tournament here, but he's still, you know, very accessible guy. And I said, how do you rate this matchup? And he said he thinks that Jund is a square favorite. You know, he wasn't saying overwhelming, but a solid favorite. And, you know, I talked him through kind of how the matchup went. And what he said is exactly what played out. Basically, a whole bunch of creatures, an early start for PV, and then clear out your ways and clean up with manlands for the Jund.
Yeah, so Paolo managed to steal a game, but not the whole match. So that set up an all-Japan final. And remember, there was a period in the game where Japan was utterly dominant in terms of Player of the Year. The reigning Player of the Year coming in was Owen Turtenwald. He had a fine tournament, but couldn't quite sustain it into the top 4. And that meant by the end that we would have another Japanese Player of the Year for 2011-2012. Would it be Yasooka? Would it be Watanabe with Jund? It went the distance, and I think from my point of view, commentating on it in the booth, what was so interesting is that every game felt like a fresh matchup in some ways.
Yeah.
It never felt like, and now here's Act 3 of Jund versus Eternal Command. It was like, now here's a game where there's this guy on the left casting lots of creatures and sending multiple Tarmogoyfs and Fix into the red zone. And now here's a guy who's winning with manlands. And now here's this really foxy graveyard-dependent game where there's land everywhere and everyone's been exhausted to oblivion. Everything was just completely different.
Yeah.
And then you get to game 5, and it's all completely different again in the signature of all ways.
Yeah, you know, I thought it was really interesting. We got to see some of the game ones where an Aether Vial was cast on turn 1, and that seemed to change the complexion of the game significantly, but it was proven that in the last game that was not the death knell for the Jund deck. You could certainly power through an Aether Vial because you still have to draw cards to be able to abuse that type of an interaction. I have to say, a little jealous that I wasn't in the booth for that one because I was downstairs with all the players. We were watching on the monitor. We were watching you and Zach's really good commentary. Man, it was tense. Everybody was just staring. Yeah. I came up for Sheldon for the last game and we were watching on the monitor up here. Man, great stuff.
Yeah, and the tension has been a feature of, we talked with Josh Utter-Layton about these sort of almost a switch that the players are having a fantastic time together and enjoying each other's company.
It's so funny how jovial they are when the match isn't going. And when it is, you could drop a pin 100 feet away in here and you could hear it. You know, I was talking to some of the coverage writers on the team, Steve Sadin and the guys. They're sitting on a totally different area of the showbox where we're filming, and they said they can hear the cards flicking from the players in the feature match area because it is dead silent. You know, we've had a couple of local players come in here as well, and they've come in and they've left going, whoa, that is tense.
Yeah. Well, what a week. Watanabe. That is your 2012 Players' Championship winner and your 2011 to 2012 Player of the Year, Yuuya Watanabe of Japan. Congratulations to him, and congratulations and thanks to the other 15 competitors who have made this such a wonderful 3 days here in downtown Seattle. Until we meet again for Pro Tour Return to Ravnica or at one of the many Grand Prix around the world, enjoy Grand Prix Moscow, Costa Rica and more. Until then, on behalf of all the coverage team, for Marshall Sutcliffe, I'm your host Richard Hagan, saying bye.